How's it going? This is David S. Cochran, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
David's got a little construction on his end. We got a puppy dog in our back door, neighbor that is learning how to use its voice. So we may get some barking and some drilling and everything, but I think ultimately David will be all right. This is sort of the modern way that we do these things is by, getting it done, getting it in. I'm in a tent in my backyard for crying out loud, trying to keep out of the house because my girlfriend's doing something on the other part of the wireless. It's just the modern world.
Oh, yeah.
I also have airplanes flying overhead as they land at John Wayne Airport. What part of the world are you from?
Philadelphia, city of brotherly love.
Yes, indeed. How come you guys are such crap fans? Why are you guys so horrible to people in that city?
Come on.
Is the brotherly love like this animosity-driven love?
Hey, I am a diehard Eagles fan. I bleed green, and I can admit we get a little out of hand, but it's passion. It's passion that drives us. I love it. Wait, what city are you from?
I'm from the Bay Area up north, but I live down in Orange County now, where it's just a little bit more perfecter, in terms of like weather and things. So, yeah,
just a bit. Yeah.
It's nice down here. How was the weather right now? Is it cold up there?
Yeah, we've had like 40 inches of snow so far this year. Actually, it's 65 and sunny today, so. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, you got us beat. It's not quite 65 yet, but it will be soon. That's nice, man.
Nice.
So we're not here just to talk about the weather. You are you're an interesting cat. You've written a couple of books, and you deal with folks who do hard things, whether it's firefighting or EMS type things. Let's talk a little bit about your background and how you got into this spot, and then what pushed you to start writing some of these stories, because that's if there's a big leap, it's going from that world into writing books about it.
Yep. Yeah. So quick background about myself. I graduated from the University of South Carolina. Go Cox. Not too good lately with sports, but after that, I wanted to pursue a career in medicine, particularly pediatric emergency medicine. So I figured becoming an EMT would be a great way to get my foot in the doorway, kind of get my feet wet with that emergency medical services and whatnot. So I worked for about 3 years now, and then I was offered a position on the National Emergency Response Team, which is contracted with FEMA. So we are deployed whenever there's a natural disaster, be it a hurricane, forest fire, blizzard, and obviously a pandemic. So we have to keep a bag packed constantly, and we get the call, and within an hour, we're heading to that disaster zone.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, because being deployed and providing aid, that's sort of where our knowledge stops on this topic. So something jumps off, there's a hurricane. Are you deployed in advance, like once the president declares emergency, or what trips that wire for you guys to get to motion?
Yeah, so obviously the president will call the emergency, but then storms are a pretty cookie cutter type thing. We can pinpoint where the storm's coming, when it's going to hit. So usually when it's like 3 days out, they'll be like, all right, prep your bags, get ready. We're going to fly down and drive you depending where it's going to hit. And we'll set up our base right outside of that disaster zone. So as soon as the storm hits, we can go in. But the pandemic, it's obviously been chaotic, and there is no specific disaster zone, and it's kind of hard to pinpoint when. So it's just keep your phone ready to go at all times.
Yeah, it's stretching the abilities of emergency management across the entire spectrum. Let's focus a little bit more on being deployable and mobile, because I've been on a 1 hour recall before and everything, and you can kind of live your life that way. I mean, you've got your bags packed, and you're like cognizant of like, okay, I'm 60 miles away. I can't really go to this party, or, you try to stay close to home, but that's an indefinite thing. You can't just do that permanently. So what are your guys' instructions? How do you live day to day? I mean, if it's during hurricane season, you can get called up, you got 3 days, but there's so many different times when you don't have that luxury. How ready is ready for you guys?
As ready as a duffel bag. I have a gym bag in my car at all times with 3 rolls of toilet paper, a towel, change of uniforms, and toothpaste, toothbrush, and that's it. Because when we're out there, we'll probably go. Sometimes you go a week, even 2 weeks without showering. Because usually, especially with a hurricane, you're just kind of put into like a abandoned like warehouse. So there's no electricity, no running water. You have to wait for the shower truck to come around. whenever that may be.
Although
So
that shower truck, sweet, sweet showers. I mean, literally one of the best showers of my life was along the Sava River. And oh my God, it was warm. It was powerful. It was so great.
I love it.
Yeah, no, it's funny. It's a hard life living like that, though. So are you on a contract where you're only getting paid when you deploy, or are you constantly getting paid? I mean, because to be in a state of readiness like that, that is for them kind of work. Like you have a bag, you're ready to go, you're prepared to live on the very edge of survival when you push forward. How does that work for you?
Yeah, so day to day, it's my company itself. So I get paid through, it's a private company actually. So typically work in Philadelphia. And then as soon as FEMA sounds the alarm, my pay shifts to the government. Not sure how exactly to do that. And then I receive my checks from the government until I return back from my deployment, whether it be 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 months, whatever.
And then that deployed status, I mean, every deployment's different. Every catastrophe that you service is different. But what does a day look like for someone like you? I mean, you wake up at when, you do what, and then you go to bed when?
So I guess New York City is a good example. So New York City was the first deployment we had when the world was coming to an end back in March for about 6 weeks. So every day I started my day at 6 a.m., reported to the base by 7 a.m. I was out on the streets until give or take like 10, 11 p.m. Head back, take a quick shower, sleep, and still it was like Groundhog Day. It was like that for 47 days straight, not a single day off.
How long are the days?
Days they range. For New York, you had some people doing 12 hours every day. I was doing 16 hours every day, and others were doing 24 on, 12 off, 24 on, 12 off for, like I said, those 2 months. So it was.
And then how's the chow? You guys brought hot meals, or are they brought in from restaurants? How do you guys get fed? I mean, these are things that people don't think about, but as a guy that's been deployed, you're like, where's that Miramite full of chow? I don't care if it's shitty eggs. I'm starving. You know?
I love you asked that, because our first night there was so chaotic because, like I said, no one really knows what to do. There's no playbook on how to deal with this pandemic. So our first night there, we were so out of sorts that our dinner was a cold cheeseburger with a slice of cheese and no bun. No nothing. So that was our dinner. But now, as time went on, luckily there's some local Italian restaurants by the base that were donating food like pizzas and sandwiches every day. So really grateful for that.
But you're right, though. Like, especially early when not everything's sorted out. Like in the Army, we got like cases of food brought to us. And granted, it's hot, but those eggs, they're green. And they're not green because they're not good for you. But I'm positive you've eaten green eggs before and you were thankful for it. You're like, just give me some hot sauce. Let's choke this down. I'm not here to enjoy this. I'm just here to feed the machine.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's just, I'll take any bit of food I can get. And that's part of the reason why they tell us to pack, not getting a little too graphic, anti-diarrhea pills. Just, keep you dry.
No, that's not graphic. It's a fact of life. I mean, you might have any number of supplements that you bring, in a tray because you don't know what you're going to have. You might have to bring salt tablets. You might have to bring, you just don't know. And then if you get pushed further away from the mothership, which is already chaos, as you know, I'm even further out. I'm out here on the edge of the bayou, helping bayou folks get whatever they need, their water and everything else. Your resources are even more limited, more austere. And this is in America.
Yeah. And that's the craziest part. For one of the hurricanes, we had to pack anti-venom. Don't know why, but we found ourselves in waist deep water and creeks with 2 armed soldiers with shotguns on either side of us to protect us from gators while we looked for bodies in the water. Like, we had no idea we were going to be getting into that till we got there.
This is why we need to be thankful for folks like you who go out and do this, because you're looking for bodies. And I always say to put the Guard, any kind of National Guard element in America with rounds, it's extraordinarily rare that happens. They don't go around patrolling and killing people as much as we want that to be the case. It's not. So when they are, even just to have, like, you're allowed to have shotgun shells, you're only allowed to shoot snakes. Like, that's what the command is going to be. It's going to be so razor thin on what you're allowed to do. They wouldn't even be able to point that thing at anybody. Like, that's how crazy the rules can be for the Guard.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. I heard a story about one of them actually had to fire off at a gator. I don't know if he killed it, but he definitely scared it off. But then the other guy got bit in the leg by a water moccasin, dragged
Come
his
on.
body out, and anti-venom came in clutch. Like, no one prepares you for that when you're going to relieve this disaster area.
Okay, so let's back up further in your timeline. Then, yeah, no one prepares you for these things. Like when I was a spy, yes, you get some training, but nothing that you got trained on matters at all when you're really doing the job. You're like, God, no one even told me about this. No one told me to read this book. How different was your A point reality of, okay, I'm qualified to go do this, to the very first time you went and
Well,
deployed? Yeah.
from an EMS perspective, it was, you get your standard training, I do CPR, all the interventions you can do to treat someone.
That's adorable.
But,
right. Thank you.
Right. Right. But with the pandemic, we had protocols changing every single day. We would start a shift with a certain set of protocols and then have it changed by lunch. Especially with, so we saw a rapid rise in cardiac arrests. Quick stat: in March of 2019, for 1 week in New York City, they were getting about 60 cardiac arrests a day. 1 week in March in 2020, they were getting 300 cardiac arrests a day citywide, with over 70% of them dying. And so many hospitals were on diversion, and we're just packed to the brim that it literally got to the point that usually, no matter how tense the situation may be, we're going to try to treat that person and stabilize them to get them to the hospital for more advanced treatment. But it got to the point where our medical command literally told us, you have 20 minutes to work on this patient. If you can't bring him back, you have to call it. And again, we know what to do, but there's only so much we can do in certain situations.
This is so important that we, again, like as we illustrate this whole thing, this is how hard this stuff is. And you're also, as an EMS guy, what you might take on any number of other roles, but if that's your primary role, you are still looking for dead bodies. You can't do anything medically for them. It's too late. However, finding bodies is always like a number one priority, because one, it's a body, it's a human, we want to take care of it. But two, also it continues to contaminate the water supply or whatever. You can't just leave them there. Someone has to do something with them,
Right. Yep. Yeah. And that's where you're qualified. You never know if you're going to be doing your day-to-day operations, just treating normal traumas or a little granny that stubs her toe, or if you're going to be waist deep in water looking for, as you said, bodies.
So when you're triaging, or I should say, when you're planning your triage operations, obviously that's coming from high. And then that, again, as you said, may change on a moment's notice. Like as you try to adapt to the ground reality, like we're finding all these cardiac arrests. But how hard is that to adapt to, and like mentally? I mean, we think about like, okay, we're not going to wear masks because there are not enough of them. Then we're going to wear masks, to keep your fingers off your face. And then. And America hated that. To like make up your damn mind, So you're dealing with that reality on the ground, but from two directions. You've got the person you're dealing with, who you're trying to help, or the agency or the element or the business. And then you have your hire that's changing its mind on the best way to deal with that. How is that to be in the middle of that?
Yeah. And I actually talk about this in the book. There's a perfect example of this is, as I said, we can only work on a patient for, this is actually in South Texas, one of my FEMA deployments there. We can only work on a patient for about 20 minutes at that time, but we are in these people's homes surrounded by their families. We're not in a secure hospital room or anything like that. So this wasn't me. One of my coworkers and his partner went to a scene, and they got called to, it was originally just the dude fainted, then he got upgraded to a cardiac arrest before they even arrived. So when they walked into the house, he was surrounded by 40 family members, and they were yelling at them like, "What are you doing? Why so?" Long story short, they had to call it. The family turned into an uproar, and they started throwing stuff at them, cursing them out. Police had to be called to the scene just to make sure the EMT and medic got away from the scene safely. So you're trying to please your protocols while also giving it the very best shot you can to make sure that this person and their family is safe and healthy.
The triage protocol, or whatever the official word is what it is. But again, you're on the ground there. You've got to deal with that family, and also look out for your well-being. How often do you find yourself completely alone from any of your peers?
More often than not, you're alone. I had First night in New York City, I had no idea. I knew Manhattan from the tourists and all, but I never been to Queens or the Bronx or Brooklyn. And of course, we were all in those different boroughs. So our first night, we had 12 to 14 calls, I believe, in that first like 7 hours. We were running rapid because when we arrived, they had 700 calls. I believe it was 500 to 700 calls pending, waiting, and the wait times for people that were calling 911 was about 9 hours. So they were so swamped that we were just going from one call to the next call. And we had no idea what we were walking into. I was asking people and saying like, hey, how do you get to this apartment? Where do I go here? How do I get there? Yeah. And luckily people were nice enough to help. But we learned fast that when you're out in the streets, you're, like you said, you're alone. And my partner was up in one of the apartments helping a woman who was vomiting at the time. So she was getting her ready to walk down the stairs. So I went ahead to the truck to pull out the stretcher and get it all set up for her. When I was pulling it out, a man came up to me, stood like within 6 inches up from me, looked me dead in the eyes, spit all down the side of my face, and then walked away. Just walked away, like mumbling, like, what is the matter with you? Like, as if like I was in the wrong for whatever I was doing. So they have a running joke that it's called airmail. It's not funny, but for us, it's funny because you gotta make light of it somehow. That they literally have to watch the skies and watch the upper apartments because if they're working on someone on the streets, people will literally throw furniture, water bottles, whatever, out their windows to try to hit the first responders while they're working.
So say what? Let me do my Oprah. What?
Yeah, it's crazy. I couldn't believe it.
Why?
Don't know. I have no idea. I wish I could tell you, but really don't know.
We're a nation of assholes. That's why. I mean, I'm assuming it's obvious that you're there to help. I mean, you probably have some kind of, I know the emergency management world, maybe you've got the vest on with your appropriate color. In some way, you're marked as someone who is there to help.
Yeah. And just it's actually when you brought up the vest, they're now issuing more and more bulletproof vests because there was a strain. I don't know if it's still an issue, but there was a period in time.
I meant a reflective vest, like the team vest that they have. But you're right. You need a plate carrier because you don't know. People are in distress and you can't assume that you're going to be well after the end of the day. You just can't.
Yeah, no, like I said, there was a strain of calls where EMTs were showing up to false calls just to get mugged and shot. There was a couple of EMTs that were shot, killed because they responded to a fake call and they walked into the apartment, never walked out again. So they're starting to issue more things. And my third or fourth night in New York City, when I was loading up a patient in the truck, literally 1 block behind me, there was a drive-by shooting and the Charger came rocketing by me right after. So like, just, you never know.
And then, and this is the point, I'm sticking on this ground truth reality stuff. And then after that happens, someone hucks an office chair at you, you laugh because it misses you and the person that you're helping, you get them swatted on the ass and into an ambulance or back into whatever it is, whoop, right on to the next call.
Yeah.
Like that's time for, you can brush shit off yourself and then it's like, who needs help next? Because I don't know how many of you there are in the case of having 700 calls, but I promise everybody it's not nearly enough. I bet, what would you say? You half staffed before you'd actually need to deal with that many people?
Yeah. So I'm just throwing out some numbers that they gave me throughout my deployment. So the stations were about 22% less staffed than usual because the virus, they would have to be mandatory out for 2 weeks if they tested positive. Then on top of that, the normal call that a normal crew ambulance would run each day was about 6 to 8. We were running 12 to 14 every day for weeks on end. So we were, and not to mention every day we were given a new list of hospitals that were on diversion, which means that we can't bring any patients to them. So I had some days where the closest hospital to me was over an hour away, like across the city. So you have to keep these people stable, get them an hour away to the hospital, and immediately clear up to get to your next call.
And then are you handing folks off into the ambulance and you're like, see ya, I'm back out to go get to the next, or are you rolling, are you off the grid for a third of your shift to get them back to the hospital yourself?
Ideally, they wanted us back on the streets as quickly as possible. But the earlier stages of it, like I said, the hospitals were so swamped that wait times to get the patient into the ER was I think some crews had to wait 7 hours. The longest I had to wait was 4 hours. So we were off the streets for 4 hours, which just made the workload even harder for those who were still in the streets. And there were some hospitals that were so backed up that they had to convert our ambulances into additional rooms. So we would back our ambulance up and they would just slap a number on and be like, all right, this is room 22, room 23. And we weren't allowed to leave until that patient was good to either get brought into the hospital or get released. So
what are the things, and let's talk about COVID specifically here. We talk about New York or just nationally how you understand it, but one of the things that is a little bit puzzling for folks, and again, if you don't know the EM world or the military world, we have the potential to have all the hospital capacity we would need, maybe not at a national level, but we have the Comfort, the Mercy, these hospital ships that the Navy can park, and we largely, as far as I know, didn't hardly use them at all. The military, the Army can set up an entire hospital in hours, right? I mean, it's an incredible thing. Those are definite resources we have, but it is hard to employ them well. And then you have a place like New York where you can put a hospital. You can make all of Central Park a hospital. That doesn't mean you're anywhere near Central Park and within an hour of that place. And again, global pandemic. So, what do you make of our inability to take these? It's such a story. It's so sensational when we deploy these things. And I'm going to bring up an example here in a minute after you answer this, but when we look at that, we have these hospital ships that are wonderfully capable. Maybe it's not the right tool in a pandemic. Maybe it is, who knows? But a field tent filled with patients, even if it's at 20% capacity to spread everybody out, we can find an open field and every high school in New York could have one. Why did we struggle with capacity when we have all of this potential capacity ready to go?
Yeah, so from my end of it, so we had strike teams and task force. Task forces were in charge of 911, so I was a task force. So I was on the streets running 911. But strike teams, so these additional resources we had, like that Navy ship that came in and the tents that were set up in Central Park, and then again in Texas when they added additional things. The strike teams, like I said, there was no playbook on how to handle this. So we were all learning on the fly. And although we had those resources, it had to be logistically thought out. And they only had days, even hours at some points to figure out what they wanted to do. So they ran with the idea that we're going to take every COVID positive patient to the ship it was every non-COVID patient to the ship. But then within literally, I think it was 18 hours, there was 3 positive COVIDs on the ship. So it just completely just destroyed that plan and they had to start from scratch. And then they tried adding more COVID patients to it, but then the hospitals were COVID. And it was just both COVID. So there's nowhere to put the stable patients who weren't positive. We had the resources. It was just so hard to figure it all out. And I think I did hear the ship ended up leaving, only being used maybe max like 30% the whole time, which I didn't know until it left.
Yeah. And again, on to everybody's credit, nobody knew how to manage this thing. We'll develop training and be better, but the next time it happens, unless it doesn't happen for a long time, then all the lessons will not be learned. Because it's expensive to develop and maintain that capacity. I mean, you would have to go through specific training, it again and continued beyond what your experience and your current training level is.
There's and like I said, the chain of protocols, endless training on how to handle what you're going to do and what you're going to wear, where you're going to take them, so on and so forth. Every day, it was a new packet full of information you had to study for your shift.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about too, and it's along these lines, is the media doesn't help you guys out. During the recent Texas storm, I'm just going to call it ABC because they all do this thing. It's so important to be sensational and sell things. Who's the anchor for ABC? It's David Muir. Okay, so David Muir says, in Texas, down in Houston, and I'm not sure if it's Houston, but something like this. Down in Houston, they've got cooler trucks deployed to be able to store the dead. Maybe. 44. I don't know. Let's say 100 people died from that storm out of 20 million people in Texas. And to sensationalize something like that, this is a normal response. We're going to the emergency manager flexes in capacity. Maybe it's he flexes in or she flexes in the Army to, hey, we have a mobile morgue. We'll have it here in this area, anticipating this could be a spot where you might put it there as a hub. Like, we're going to bring bodies here because this is where the morgue is going to be. This does not mean that there's going to be mass death and destruction. And I think puts you guys in harm's way more than you need to be, because people are now terrified that the cold is going to come get them. And not to make light at all of the tragedy and the deaths that did happen, but to report that in that way. And he definitely sold it like, here comes the death.
Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing that up, because it was not only the virus effects that kept us busy, it was partially how we handle it that kept us even more busy. Like you said, these people were, one, they were in lockdown. They couldn't go to the gym. They couldn't go out to public places. They couldn't go anywhere to blow off steam. So they were just sitting in their little 10 by 10 apartments, watching the news all day, every day about how everyone's dying, the world's ending, there's no end to this. So we ended up becoming therapists for a lot of people. We were called, I had at least 4 or 5 calls every day, just someone that just wanted to hold your hand and just tell them the information that they need to know, and let them know that it's going to be okay and they're not as alone as they think. Because the people that we weren't able to do that for, we saw a jump in suicides about 200%, because these lockdowns, these poor people that, maybe a little unstable themselves, they weren't able to get their medications, they weren't able to see their doctors, they weren't able to go to the therapist, they weren't able to do the things that they usually do to relieve their stress and anxiety. So we were walking into suicides in all its forms. And those who maybe didn't commit suicide yet, I walked into apartments that had stick figures drawn on the walls with names, because that was their friends. So it wasn't only the virus itself, it's also partially how we handle the virus that kept us going and going and going every day.
Yeah, we don't know what the answer is yet, but the global pandemic and panic, there's definitely a panic element where we've caused ourselves a lot more distress, a lot more death and destruction than we probably realize. And we don't know the total morbidity rate for the United States for 2020. But when we do, we'll have a better idea, because all we reported on was positive tests and things that didn't tell you enough, yeah. Did this person, did they have cancer? Were they getting chemotherapy to extend their life 6 months? Did they die in less than 6 months? Okay, maybe they died from COVID, but we're also sensationalizing this death to serve some kind of, I don't know, I just don't understand it. And again, it puts you guys in a hard spot.
Yeah, well, media has been constantly just going for ratings, and what sells, fear. And they're just going to keep like that COVID tracker or case tracker, whatever the CNN had on for weeks, months on end. And
yes.
I don't know how true this is, but I've been hearing from different medical professionals that a lot of these COVID tests that they were releasing were popping positive for a single cell, the tiniest bit of the virus in the system, and to the sense that it was literally impossible to transmit to someone else. But the test was picking it up. So there were some positives out there that weren't truly positives. So like you said, there's no way to tell what the actual numbers were, and I don't think there ever will be a way to tell what the true numbers were. Right?
And to be fair, everybody was incented to be positive, and if you give a business an opportunity to make money by just simply saying, yeah, they're positive for COVID, no one's going to come back and check. And yeah, let's not get too much into that now. I'm not getting too distracted by that, but I definitely wanted to spend some time just illustrating how challenging it is to be someone like you, or to run a team of yous, and how there's never enough of yous to go out and deal with these things. We're using the pandemic in this case, but it could be a forest fire. It could be earthquake recovery. It could be anything. And you walk in, and yes, you're EMS guy, but there's also a lot of other disciplines that are there as part of the same team. How could you even put your hands around how many other disciplines besides just emergency medical services there? I mean, who else is at these scenes doing active on the ground, human engagement?
Oh yeah, it goes well beyond EMS. Every call we went on, you had the fire departments involved, you had PD involved, National Guard in some cases were involved. There's so many pieces that go into this, is just working on the scenes. And like I said, we had no idea what we were dealing with. We had no equipment for some of these calls. So it was kind of nerve-wracking to orchestrate how we want to go about this while also remaining safe. And, like I said, with the patients who were, I don't want to say off their meds, but they were a little unstable at the time, and they were a little crazy when we walked in, okay, are police going to handle the majority of this call, or are we going to try to talk to them? So there's a lot of working pieces to try to get through this.
If you could adjust, and just EMS, if you could adjust one thing to make it more to empower the people on the ground, the people like you that are out there putting their hands on Americans? What's one thing that you would address? More or less, completely new thing, whatever it is. But what would you do? Like, if you could say anything to the head of FEMA right now, what would you say? Like, here's a change you could make to make our job not easier, but just less chaotic.
Sleep. Could certainly use some sleep. A good night of sleep for me was about 4 hours. No, but in all seriousness, EMS is working even pre-pandemic, and I'm sure post-pandemic, a lot of EMS, EMTs and medics, because I'm not going to get political in the sense of getting the pay right now, but the pay is not anything special. And a lot of EMTs and medics with families are working nearly 60 to 70 hours every single week just to keep up with their bills. So the people that we rely on most in our lowest moments, whether it be trauma or illness, they're showing up to their doorstep on literally maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep for each of the 4 nights prior to showing up to that doorstep. So it's just exhaustion. And then not to mention when you're on that call, you have to keep your focus to think faster on your feet and to block out all the noise of family around you, because you may at some point be that person that's going to be make or break if that person makes it or not. Yeah.
Yes, and I definitely want to spend some time on this topic, because this goes to the overall challenges that you don't understand. Like, we would never know that. Okay, so you're running on a belly full of cold green eggs and some unperishable bread, which again, that's fine. You don't know when you'll eat again. You're exhausted, and you and I both know you've got a complicated job. A lot of it is just muscle memory. You're going to throw in. I was talking with my buddy Scott Heasing the other day about how we used to watch Emergency, and they would call in on their box, and they're like, "Rampart, we've got this," and they're like, "Start an IV drip of D5W and lactated ringers." You know, that was like the standard thing. Okay, great. You jam a needle into vein, shit, I can do that, right? But the day-to-day things, the complexity of what you're doing on that much sleep. I know as a combat guy, I can operate at that level indefinitely, but it's really hard for me to understand when I've degraded. Like, you've got to look for in other people, like, hey, we are really tired. We need a break. But only if you can have a break. So how do you manage your own inability to do that for a long time and perform at the highest level? Yes, you can adrenaline through it, but at some point you do lose pretty quickly your ability to operate at what would be a professional level, because there's just you've asked too much of these people on the ground.
Yeah, and luckily, like you, I'm very similar in the sense that I can thrive off of 4 hours of sleep, but obviously
I don't wanna.
No, exactly. Neither do I. But the thing that caught me the most was like, oh God, this day is never going to end. It's not just the mental stress of the job; it's the physical stress. I've had patients that, I'm not even kidding, were 720 pounds that I had to take down like 3 flights of stairs. Yeah. So it's looking at that task ahead that's like, oh God, I need some more energy for this.
Let me just jump in, because there's some great color here. So, every night we would go out and patrol in Baghdad, and I patrolled so much I wore out my body armor. One day the plate just fell out, and I don't know where it fell out, but it fell out because the Velcro was done. That's how much we patrolled. And sometimes the commander's like, you have to go back out. And you know what you have to do? You have to go back out. So you look at your gear and you're just like pissed off at your gear. Like, God damn it. I just wanted to get some rest, cool off, because it's hot. You'd soak all the way through all of your clothes. This is more for the audience. You get all this stuff, David. But that wear and tear, where you look at your gear and it just gives you this negative response. It's like, oh man. And then what do? You throw in a dip, you grab an energy drink, maybe you smoke a ciggy, whatever it is that gets you going. Even if you don't do these things normally, this is for the audience, even if you don't normally do these things, you do these things when you're deployed and you're working at the edge of your mental and physical limits, because you don't have an option. And it might be that you burn up 6 hours waiting to go into the space that you're going to work because of some logistical things. So you just sit there and you wait. Like for me, waiting on a helicopter. Well, you have to wait at the helipad. It's coming. They don't know when, but it's coming, and you cannot miss that thing. So you sit out there for 8 hours in 100-degree heat, and then you go do your job. So when David is saying this, you try to sleep, but it's 100 degrees outside, and you're listening for a helicopter. All these things are going on. Oh, by the way, combat zone, so you never know what's going to happen. All of that has to resonate with you, man. I know it does.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm not going to compare my job to someone that was.
Oh, you can't.
But,
you're working at an instability place. It doesn't matter what it is. It's the same. It's the same thing.
Yes, and it's funny you said the 100 degrees. When I was in South Texas, it was the heart of August, so we were in a gown, N95, goggles, gloves. We were basically wearing a winter outfit, and there was one day it was 118 degrees, at least like the heat index or what it felt like was. So we were working on this patient outside for an hour, and when I took my mask off, I could have filled half a glass with my sweat, it just dripping out off my face. So we had, I think I downed like 4 water bottles immediately after that call. So it was so hard to keep going for that hour, because this was a lot of physically like working around, running around, grabbing this, grabbing that, lifting. And it, like I said, it's battling the heat. But from the EMS standpoint, it's kind of nice because you see instant results from your work. So the thing that keeps us going is, yes, I'm hurting right now. I'm mentally drained. But if I can bring a smile to this person's face, then I know that what I'm doing is making a difference. And as long as I can stay strong, then they can stay strong through what they're dealing with.
Another thing that people don't realize about these kind of environments, they have a thing called a wet bulb test for people who don't know this thing. And it's a way to manage how hard you should work in the environment you're giving. Now, granted, it doesn't really work in a desert because there's no humidity there. But like in an environment like you were describing, you're required to drink a certain amount of fluid and only work and rest at a certain pace. None of that matters when you're actually doing the job for real and people's lives are on the line. Yeah. So in that case, you'd be at a heat category 5+, which means that you should be working about 10 minutes in an hour and the rest of the time in the shade trying to cool off. But that, it's not reality. And so, have you, and I'm just fishing here, maybe I don't have this down, but have you ever had to continue to work? You're like, I'm going to throw an IV in so I can continue to hydrate. Because, in some scenarios, you've got to drink 5 gallons of water a day and you still can't maintain your level of hydration, which you desperately need to maintain your ability to do it. Have you ever just thrown an IV and just kept working?
Unfortunately, on those, we weren't able to because equipment was pretty scarce. But
okay.
I would be lying if I haven't met people that was like, even if it was like, a rougher night the night before at the bar or something like that, kind of like get them through it, give them a little IV. Not that that's professional or anything like that. Right. I never did that. But there's definitely times where it's just like, I need some help, and the medics will help EMTs will help medics to try to help each other get through it. Because we had to, my partner and I had to help each other because when we were down in Texas, it was immediately following a hurricane. We were there for hurricane relief for the first 4 days, and then shifted to COVID. But the hurricane brought 18 inches of rain, so there was mass flooding everywhere. So as soon as the storm passed, it was just stale water, which led to a rapid increase of mosquitoes, hatchings or whatever. Yep. Yeah. And not only were we battling the heat, but we were literally getting eaten alive. All the stores were sold out of the mosquito bug spray or anything like that. So we were being eaten alive. So we had, when we returned back to base, my partner was bleeding from a few of the bites that he had. And one of the medics from Texas said, "Hey, here's a fun little tip for you. Not sure if it works or not, but if you take a dryer sheet and rub it all on your clothes, apparently that deters mosquitoes a little bit more."
Yeah, so for a while. Until you sweat through your clothes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's the little things like that to help each other.
Just for the audience, if you guys are watching, you guys dig what I do, just click that subscribe button. There's a little reminder bell that will let you know when I'm going live with incredible people like David and having these conversations. Because I'm positive no one's asking you questions like this because they don't understand the ground truth complexities like we do here. So that would help me out if you guys all did that. And then definitely go to davidscochran.com. Just super simple. No E at the end of Cochran if you're listening on the podcast side. David S. Cochran, and you can find out more about all his stuff. He's got a series of books that he's working on, as well as the current book. Let's talk about the current. I know probably covered a lot of that stuff already, but let's talk about the current book and get into that part of it.
Yeah. So simply put, Behind the Mask, Untold Stories of EMS in a Pandemic. I wanted to, like I said, media talks about a lot of appreciation for EMS and first responders, but they don't really dive into what exactly we're doing. So this book kind of gives the reader that firsthand, unfiltered, horrific experience of what the struggles and sacrifices that we've been going through, not only throughout this past year, but in general. So hopefully as they read it, it gains a little bit of a deeper appreciation of when an EMT or a medic or any first responder shows up to your doorstep, just know that they have a lot of baggage coming with them, that yes, you're facing a tough moment, but they are also facing a tough moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, they're joining you in your crappy moment, and yeah, when people say thank you for your service, I appreciate it. But it's like saying, hey, how you doing? But that's it. Like there's nothing in it. You guys are for sure. And again, this is going back to a few minutes ago. You definitely can attribute what you guys do to the most challenging conflict zones, because you are absolutely burning up your body when you do these things. You know, you are being exposed to pathogens that may or may not present themselves for decades. You don't know. I mean, you think about walking through a flood. You know this as well as I do. There are chemicals in there and access to whatever snakes that the National Guard has shotguns to take on. All of these things are out there. You're drinking energy drinks. Your diet is garbage. You're not getting enough sleep. You know, you're breaking your body because you're carrying all this gear around and everything. All this stuff is part of what you do. So I'm going to say it for all of us. We don't understand how hard you work. We know you're incredible, and we appreciate what you all do, because as a guy that's done similar kinds of things, it's remarkable that we can put you guys in this incredibly complex, dangerous, life shortening environment, and then just pay you peanuts. It's just insane. So thank you for taking that sacrifice on for all of us when we're in most desperate need of help. There's David helping us out.
Thank you. Really appreciate to hear that. We all do.
Yeah. So why a book though? I mean, you're an EMS guy. You guys don't normally write books. And if you do, it's like sexy doctors in the broom closet having sex with the nurses, you know, that kind of thing. But you didn't write that book.
No, unfortunately, I haven't had any of those experiences. But no, I didn't know I was going to be a writer either. I never went to school for writing. You know, and when I tell everyone I wrote a book, they're like, "What? You?" Yeah, right. But no. So a lot of the ways I could relieve stress at night, because I barely had any sleep. So instead of staring at a ceiling for 3 hours, I would kind of write about what I experienced and what my coworkers were going through. And like I said, I figured it was kind of a good way to share with the world what exactly is going on behind the scenes on these day-to-day on why we want to appreciate the work that EMS is doing.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. And even though you went to a state school in the South, you seem to have made yourself well-read and well-spoken. So I can appreciate that. I'm just taking a poke at him for his Southern USC school. So
yes, the real USC.
The real USC. Go Cox. Cox. Well, I don't know why there's not a USC versus USC fight game every year. Like that should just be standard.
Yeah, well, our big rival's Clemson, but they've been blowing us out of the water as of late. So.
Yeah, and you got a chance of beating the other USC because they're not always all that good. So sometimes they're incredible, but if they're not cheating, then they go back to the pack a little bit. That's just my dig at. That's my dig at this USC over here on this end of things.
Fair.
I'll stop making fun of colleges now and get back to work with you. So you're writing this book. One of the things you have to do when you write a book is you have to find someone incredible to write a foreword for you, maybe even an acknowledgement from somebody else. Who did you get to write for this thing, and why did you pick the people that you did? Because your world is not a world that has a lot of like superstars in it, right? I mean, it's like name the most famous paramedic ever. Gage from Emergency. No, not him. Right. So anyhow, who did you get to do your acknowledgments and forewords and stuff?
Yeah. So, as far are you talking about like the stories that are included in the book?
No, I mean like the people that endorse the book. Like when you say, hey, so and so, he's writing this book. I'm proud to write the foreword for it, and that kind of. Did you do any of those things? I guess is what I should ask.
No.
Just got it done. Just got it done.
Just plugging away. Yeah.
Who's the most famous person in your industry? Man, do we even know who this person is?
No, I don't know. And that's what's special about the book and the EMS work is that all these stories all just came from, I don't want to say generic, but just everyday people. There are no superstars in the field, and I'm certainly not a superstar. So this is just day-to-day stories that we're going through every day. Just regular people. I
think it illustrates nicely the point that you guys are really on the ground out there, too busy to write books. And thank you for doing it, because it needs to be written. But also, like, there's just no peak person. I mean, at some point, you get to a general who's making calls on things, and you're working under their command, or some state health official. But ultimately, those people are also invisible too. I mean, they're just there's no like beacons without you writing this book.
Certainly, yeah, and that's partially why I feel like, at least unless I'm missing something, the world doesn't really know what exactly that firsthand experience is unless you go for a ride along or you're shadowing or you're taking the course itself. So that's why I figured this was a good opportunity to get the word out.
This sounds like an exciting life, though. I mean, we've talked about all this challenge and it's sexy and everything. You're running around, and again, nurses and doctors and broom closets and all that stuff's going on. But what would be your advice to someone who's thinking about becoming an EMS, special response person who works for FEMA under a contract?
Well, now more than ever, you have to be willing to put yourself after someone or put someone else before your own life. You have to be willing to, yeah, I'm only going to get 3 hours of sleep tonight, but I'm still going to show up to work the next day. Or, yeah, I'm not going to eat for an extended period of time, but I'm still going to be there for that person when they need me. Not to mention, when you're on the call itself, you need to be able to think fast. And yeah, their relative may be yelling in my back ear, but I have to block that out because I need to put his or her priorities before anyone else's. And and not to mention the physical work side of it too. You're going to show up to someone who is a little overweight, but you can't look at them and be like, no, I'm not doing this. You have to power through whatever you're facing.
This is a big point. I'm glad we came back to this because I wanted to bring this up. But first, let me mention also, don't forget to go to David's website, davidscochran.com. And then I'm going to put a link. Every book that he sells, the proceeds of that book sale are going to go to I got to look at the name of the fund here. The Fighters in Emergency, the EMS, the Firefighters and EMS Foundation. And a portion of every book sold is going to go to that. And that basically just takes that community and puts help into it. So definitely, even if you're not interested in that stuff and you want to help, there's a good place to take all of these incredible people that do all the sacrifice and help them manage their own ability to take care of one another. Let me get back to this. So this will sound crazy, but I used to have a 400-pound black stepmom, and she was an enormous woman who had a heart attack and ultimately died. And when you die, you don't get to pick, often where you end up. And so now you have EMTs that come into this small bungalow house, and you encounter this person that is wedged in between a bed and a wall. And this is not the case with my stepmom, but it easily could be. And so it's not only getting the person down a flight of stairs, you have to physically get this person, and maybe they're still alive and you're trying to care for them. David, it shocks me how hard some of this stuff is. Like, you actually become movers. Like, now you have to move this bed out of the way. You got to get the gurney in there. And hey, husband who's grieving and screaming his head off because his wife is having a heart attack, I'm going to need you to help me move this, this gurney down the hallway. I mean, dude. That's just one scenario. And a 700-pound person, that's not a 4-person carry. That's a team, No.
And usually when tragedy strikes, it doesn't choose the most opportune times to.
No, you're wedged in a bathroom or something. Like, how do I get this person out?
How do I get this person out? Because it's not just like a box I can just throw around and drag out and get out there. So how can I safely remove this person from the bathroom and get them to an area where I can work on them?
Right.
So, yeah.
How do you do that? Like, do you have enough time to call in for help? Like, if we can get this person, if you get an IV in their arm, you're way ahead of the game. But someone who flumps over on the toilet that you can't physically by yourself manhandle, or even two of you to get them out. I mean, how do you do that without causing harm to the person?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So we got to start. Obviously, we can't just let the person sit there. We're going to start and apply our interventions in any way we can. But yeah, we're going to instantly get on the radio. And that's where that teamwork comes in. We're going to have the fire department show up. We'll have PD if someone needs to be like a little restraint or anything like that. So, obviously we can't just sit there and be like, man, I'm sorry. We're going to have to, wait 20 minutes. How you feeling? But,
and also, like, hey, watch out. Here comes Ted, the firefighter. He's going to take an axe to your doorway and he's going to make it bigger, or whatever it is. I mean, because that stuff's all not even secondary. It's tertiary at best. You have to get this person to help. That's what everybody wants, but it's not necessarily going to be pretty,
Right. Yeah. No. And we've been yelled at like, "Oh, you broke my door hinge," or "Oh, you broke my railing." Like, okay,
I sure did.
Your mom is unconscious right now. We're trying to get her so that you have a mom by the end of the day. So like, it's just a lot of little things you got to overlook when you're on these calls.
Oh, it's such thankless work, man. It's so crazy. It's
Yeah.
bananas. What state does the best with emergency management in terms of EMS? Like, because there's states that do it better than others.
Uh, that's hard to tell. I'm not going to go against Philadelphia. I think we have a
Okay.
great system here, Philly Fire and AMR. We have, luckily, one of the largest stations for the largest ambulance company in the world with my company. And then you also have Philly Fire, which seems to have a station about every couple blocks. So
Yeah.
we're pretty on top of it. Not to mention the medicals. We have, I think, at least 12, 13 different hospitals in the Philadelphia region that we can get to. So it's I like what we're doing here.
I got to give a shout out to Las Vegas Fire, and I mean Las Vegas, like on the Strip. They have a unique fire department there with unique problems, and I happened to be there for a fire that broke out in one of the hotels on the Strip, and I could see the whole thing happen. And within, I'm going to say seconds, they were out of the building, in the truck. They drove not very far at all, like literally like to the next building, and then that fire was out 20 minutes. I mean, just incredible. I mean, if you guys don't know about Vegas, just getting from your room to the bar can take 20 minutes. And these dudes worked it. I mean, it was impressive. They were on top of it, and man, and I imagine they have to be that fast, because if that thing gets going, it's a horrible, horrible outcome otherwise. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the foundation and what they do specifically. I alluded to it earlier and talked about how your book is going to contribute to it, but let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's the Firefighters and EMS Foundation. So I plan to donate a portion of every book sold to this foundation, because they're a foundation that has hit some tough times. They're not really getting the funding that they used to, and they're kind of on the brink of just shutting down shop. I mean, like, we unfortunately can't help out. So I'm trying to partner with them to get them going again. Because they use their funds, 100% of their funds goes solely towards helping first responders who may have been hit with a sudden medical issue that they can't fully afford. So they provide medical relief in the shape of $10,000, $20,000 if need be, to help them get back on their feet and help their family until they're able to get back to work again.
Yeah, and this is a good effort. This is a good charity. I mean, you guys are doing things, and let me just tell you, if they're doing 100%, it's because these guys care about it. They're putting a lot of their life and effort into it, and they can definitely use our support. If you're inclined to help out the fire and EMS folks, this is a good place. I can just vouch for it right now, because you don't go 100% on your. That means someone's eating cost every month. And we can all do better at helping them. Can you really quick, before we run out of time, tell us about your book series that you're doing as well too? I want to shine some light on that, because I think it's a pretty cool. I appreciate what you're doing, and this is fiction based, right?
Yes, this is fiction based. This is kind of how I started writing first, and it just happened to be, either poor timing or great timing that So anyway, I'll just talk about the book first. So the book is Brothers at War, Corrupt Nation. It's the first of what's going to be a 5-book fictional series. Okay. And it runs with the idea of, what if all 50 states were to secede from the federal government to run under their own state law? So governors become presidents, state lines become country borders. But naturally, a transition like that isn't going to come with ease. There's going to be territorial disputes that will lead to battles. There are going to be failing economies, different trades, and there's going to be foreign players that come into the series as it goes on. So I say that it was kind of poor time, but great time, because the first 3 chapters indirectly lined up with exactly of how the month of November played out with our political system, as far as the riots and the divide and the chaos leading all the way up to inauguration. So it's been a fun series that I've been working on.
I put it today, as things stand right now, I put it at 65% that the nation is not in the current configuration in the next 5 years. That's where I put it right now. We'll see what happens. But I think enough people want to get away from each other that we're going to find ways to hopefully peaceably do that. And hopefully we do a better job of getting along so we can stay the same great nation that we are. But boy, there's a lot of conflict out there.
It's a tough world right now. That's
like you said, it's a good time to write that kind of a book, though. All right. So anything else you want to get into at all before we wrap this thing up?
No, I think we covered everything. Also, if you don't want to go to my website, all my books are available for purchase directly on Amazon as well, in ebook and paper book form. And also, if you don't want to purchase a book, you can also go on my website. There's a link directly to the donation page for that EMS Foundation to make a direct donation if you'd like.
Yeah, and definitely, I mean, support. I'll put the link into the show notes for the book to go to get David's books. And if you go through that Amazon link, it helps us out, of course. And just in general, I mean, look, David's doing good work. I appreciate what you're doing. And you're taking the time to come and talk to us. This is one of the things I love about the folks that go on the ground. We've had people from the Guard on the show talking about it. We get so riled up about, hey, there's tanks on trains. The Army's getting ready to invade Philadelphia. And it's like, nah, just relax. We're just moving tanks from here to there. Chill out. Exactly. We got an exercise, you know. The National Guard isn't in the business of shooting Americans. That's just not a real thing. Let these folks work. And also understand that emergency managers have to flex in resources. Maybe they don't even need that resource, but they need to get it into the area, you know, and get it out of the federal warehouse where it's kept or whatever. And it doesn't do any good if it's sitting there and then it takes 24 hours to. So they bring these resources. It doesn't mean that we necessarily need it. It's a lot of these things are just in cases. There's a plan. People are doing their best to mitigate harm. Let's not spread fear as our default. All right, that's my rant.
Exactly.
It's like, this drives me crazy, David.
Hey, that's social media. Everyone has an opinion, and as soon as they see one thing, everyone's going to run with it, whether it's good or bad.
All right, brother. Let me run this video. Stand by. We'll wrap this thing up.
All right, sounds good.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much for watching.